We know camels can go days without drinking water. So this topic is about water. We're going to learn a little bit about osmoregulation. This is a really big word and it may throw you off a little bit. You might get confused. Oh, that's a crazy word. But trust me, it's actually not that bad. So let's just get into it slowly. So here we have a normal human being, Captain Jack Sparrow. And we know all living things are made up of cells, right? Billions and billions of cells. If our cells were to die, we will die. Okay, so it's important that our cells are kept alive and healthy. How are our cells kept healthy and alive? By making sure we give them the right nutrients and all these kinds of things so they can stay alive. Now, how do we do that? How do we ensure our cells get enough nutrients or water, essentially? This is how. So here we have our heart, right? We know our heart is an organ that pumps blood around our body in order to ensure that all our cells get nutrients and blood, right? To be able to survive. So let's take this. Here's the heart. This is obviously not how it really looks like, so just bear that in mind. So now the heart, it pumps blood out of this big artery. Now, as the nutrients flow through this artery, small branches are made. So now it will branch off into a smaller artery, and then an even smaller artery, and then a really small vessel called a capillary. Now, what's the difference between a capillary and these big arteries? Yes, the size, capillaries are small, but the main thing is the capillary is permeable. You notice how these arteries have black lines next to them. This means that nothing can cross them, so the blood can't leave and the nutrients can't pass. But here in the capillaries, the blood can leave and the nutrients can pass. And that's important because the cells are located next to the capillaries. So when this nutrients and this blood come in here, they can diffuse out or go out to the cells and supply them in order and now when these cells receive these nutrients, they can use it to survive. Okay? So that's why water is important. Okay? That's why blood is important, because blood is mostly water. Okay? Now, to stress how important it is, we are made up of 70% water. We are mainly water, and that's because our cells are mainly water. We are made of cells, and our cells are made of water. Hence, we are mainly made of water. But besides the cells, we also have blood inside our vessels, like our vessels, like our arteries and veins and capillaries. Also, we also have water in the space between our cells. So we notice here, right, the capillaries have blood inside them. The blood or the water could leave inside this space and then to the cell. So not only does the cells and the vessels have blood or water, also the space in between the cells. Okay. Now this is almost the whole picture. This is what osmoregulation kind of means, but we have to know what it exactly means. So osmoregulation is the process of regulating the water inside our body. Okay, it's important that we maintain 70% water in our body, otherwise our cells won't get enough nutrients. Because now, say we half the amount of water, now each cell is going to get half the amount that it normally gets, and so it will die. So osmoregulation is keeping the water in your body the same. Okay? But that's not all. It's not only about water. So let me show you the full definition. Osmoregulation. Osmolarity means water potential, which means water and the ions inside. So osmoregulation is not only about regulating the water, but also the ions inside it. So not only is it important to keep the water level the same, but also the ion level the same. Okay, why does this matter? Why does this matter? Because, for example, say we have enough water, won't the cells get enough water and be okay? No, actually not. These ions matter because you actually should know this, and we'll get to it now. Why does these ions matter? You need to make sure for this topic you understand osmosis. So let's get to a picture. So here we have the same picture. I'm just zooming in on a capillary. Okay, I'm zooming in on this area and the cells next to it. So why does these ions matter? So assume there's no ions. We know that water will go from the capillaries past this membrane into the cells to supply it, right? So that it can have the nutrients and everything it needs. Now, consider the ions. We know that if the plasma is not very concentrated with ions, that means if the plasma is less concentrated with ions than the cell is, it means, according to osmosis, that the water will leave in order to even out the concentration, right? If the cells are more concentrated with ions, the water will leave and supply the cells. But if we have way more ions, say too many ions, like this, we increase it a lot. Now the concentration inside the plasma is increasing so much that no longer does the water want to leave the plasma to go to the cells. Now it's so concentrated that it's even more concentrated than the cells, and now water from the cells will leave the cells and come to the plasma to even out the concentration by osmosis. So by this logic, you can see the ions really matter, because if there's too many ions, even if there's enough water, the water won't leave the plasma or won't leave the vessels. Actually, the water will leave the cells into the vessels, and so the cells die because they're losing water, and that's the opposite of what we want to happen. We want the cells to gain water. So if you understand osmosis, you understand this process. So osmoregulation is the control of water potential. Water potential is both water and ions, okay? So it's the control of both water and ions of the body fluids. And by body fluids, I just mean your what's in your vessels, what's in your cells, what's in your space in between the cells, all basically the fluid of your whole body. So it's basically regulating this. If you can regulate and keep the water potential constant, your cells will be happy and they will always get the right amount of nutrients and water. If this is not maintained, then it will lose water or get too little. Okay, so that's the important part you need to understand about osmoregulation. Now let's take a real life example of osmoregulation. How does your body maintain a constant level? Because I just mentioned it's important to maintain a constant level of ions in water, but how does your body do it? It can't just be magic, there has to be a way. So let's use this example. Here we have Captain Jack Sparrow. He's on an island, his favorite place. We know on an island, especially with all those clothes, you will lose a lot of water, you will sweat. It's so hot. To keep your body cool, you will sweat. But the problem with sweating is you're losing water and salt, because we know our sweat is a bit salty. Okay, so meaning we're losing water and some of these ions, we're losing it. Okay, and we know if we keep losing it, if we lose too much of it, then it's bad. We need to maintain a constant level, as I just mentioned. So how does your body ensure to maintain this constant level? Because he's losing a lot of it. This means he needs to prevent that and keep some. So despite the fact that he's losing some by sweating, what's going to happen now is his body is going to do osmoregulation. This is a type of homeostasis, okay? So how he does this is his kidneys. So your kidneys is an organ, okay? And this organ behaves a lot like a filter. So you can imagine passing something through a filter. Some stuff passes through and some stuff doesn't. Now a kidney is a kind of cool filter because it can decide how much stuff passes through. So we know your kidney is here and a lot of blood, and what it does is it decides how much water and salt is kept in your body. So say he's losing a lot of water and salt. Now his kidney is going to become a really tight filter, preventing water from leaving. So now more water and salt will be kept in his body instead of being peed out. And this makes sense because if you go outside and it's really, really hot and you stay there for a long time, you actually don't pee. So you feel like, oh, I haven't peed in a while. That's because your body is trying to keep the water that it lost by sweating. Okay, so that's one example of osmoregulation. Let's use a fish. This is the one more example that I'll use. So we know that there are two kinds of fish, one that lives in the ocean and one that lives in freshwater. And the main difference between ocean and freshwater is the amount of ions or salt. The one is much more concentrated and the one is less concentrated. So let's say we have a freshwater fish, okay, and we take it out of the freshwater and put it into salt water. So a freshwater fish has a very low concentration of ions inside its body. And if you put it in a place with a high concentration of ions, it will lose water because the water is going to leave trying to equalize out the environment. And by losing so much water, it means this fish, the cells, will not get water anymore because it's being lost to the environment, so it will die. That's why you cannot put a freshwater fish into salt water. It will lose water and die, okay? Water will leave it and it will die. But let's take this fish now and put it into its natural environment. What will happen here is this fish actually now is slightly more concentrated. It has slightly more ions than the environment. So now water will go into it. Now, won't you say now that this fish will die because it's gaining water? Actually, no, because this fish has some ways of doing osmoregulation in its environment. It has ways of losing water. So, in contrast here, when the water is lost, it has no ways of keeping water, so it dies. But when you put it in its natural environment, despite the fact that it's gaining water due to the osmosis, it has other cool ways, for example, by the gills, to lose water. Therefore, it's doing homeostasis. It's osmoregulating. So at the end of the day, it stays healthy and alive. Okay? So these are just two examples of what I mean by osmoregulation. It's just what your body does to make sure your water and your ions, or your water and your ions are kept the same. And this is important for osmosis. If you understand why this is important with regarding to osmosis, then you get it. And these are just two examples. So your kidney can do it. Your kidney can help keep water and ions, and the fish can lose and gain water or ions through their gills. Okay. And there's also one last thing, something called an Osmo Conformer. This is essentially a type of organism that no matter where you put it, it doesn't do osmoregulation. So its internal body will be the same as the external environment. Okay. It doesn't adapt. It will be the same as its environment. It does not osmoregulate.